look, anybody at all is seriously concerned about what's going on in the world right now. I mean, unless you live in a lead mine, you're not aware of the fact. That's the only other person who could be not aware of the fact that serious things are going on here. And you had asked me a question that I wasn't able to answer very well because what I was hearing, you've got a clock, so you've got to go to breaks. You've got hard breaks, and you know me, I try to listen for the music coming up so that I can help you to make it sound good. I couldn't hear any of that stuff, so I went short so that you would have control of the time breaks. That's what was going on there. If you wonder why I wasn't waxing as long as I normally would. But I think it would be good in light of the fact that I got a tweet that I wanted to read to you here that I'm not sure if you saw. Here's what the tweet says. It was unwise of you to appear on an episode of that's Dr. Brown's program, where Brown threw his hat in the ring in tentative support of Chuck Pierce's and Sid Roth's prophecies that the coronavirus pandemic would turn directions on the Passover. And that's from Chris Rosebrough. So,
well, I'd expect nothing less from Chris. But here's what always grieves me. We can have our disagreements, but it's the dishonesty of the hypercritics that concern me. My whole reason for playing these clips was to put everything out in the open for both sides. In other words, if these are real prophetic words, then is God speaking prophetically? Should we take notice of that? Is he emphasizing the Passover and the blood of the Lamb? Or are these flaky words or proof that prophecy isn't for today? Let's look at it. So that's my whole purpose. I endorse nothing other than the process of using accountability for things that claim to be prophecies. And in both cases, these brothers had prophesied shaking or upheaval the first few months of this year with a real shift coming in the Passover. I thought, okay, so they spoke about something in advance. Now they're giving a time when we can expect a clear shift. Let's see, because we have very little accountability in the charismatic movement for prophetic words.
I thought, what a great opportunity to put this in front of everybody. Yeah, so that was the whole purpose of doing it. So if Chris thinks the people involved are crazy or whatever, that's his business. He's cessationist, etc. But I didn't throw my hat in with anyone. What I said is, let's use this as an opportunity to test and to see.
Okay, couple things.
I think it's a great time for you to be on, actually.
Okay, couple things. First of all, Rich managed to get he's got your mic now, so you sound great now. You can still probably only hear me over your phone, but your microphone is now working for us. So we've got you really, really clear through your microphone. So I guess the way for you to hear us is through your phone, but now it's through the microphone. Just so you're aware of that. You sound even better. Let me just, are these the words? Because someone had tweeted this. Let me just see if I'm, because I haven't followed this. I'm sorry. It's not really my area. And let me just mention that when we use the term cessationist, I'm not sure exactly how you're using that all the time, but for us, that's primarily in regards to sign gifts, apostolic sign gifts. I guess maybe that might have something to do with the idea of a prophet in some sense, though there are different kinds of prophecy. But here are the two things I've seen. Chuck Pierce says there's going to be a transition. A season is going to end and a season is going to begin. And then Tracy Cook says we're going to come to the first stage of this on April 15th through 16th during the Passover season. Now, that was on Supernatural. So here's my question. How could those be disproven? Because there's nothing really specific. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of news articles that are coming across all of our phones and desktops every single day. And any one of them could be pointed to, see, there was a change. There was a 1% difference over here type of a thing. I mean, do you hear one of my concerns is that, and I would think this would resonate with you especially, we in dealing with messianic prophecies, we have to deal with how the New Testament writers interpreted Old Testament texts, and so we have to be very cognizant of some of the arguments that, well, that's too vague. that could be fulfilled by anything. You see what I mean by we have to be consistent and very focused upon how something like this would actually work out. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so a few responses. One is that we know for sure that there are biblical prophecies that are somewhat ambiguous. Or how do we interpret the book of Revelation or some of the visions in Zechariah or Daniel? So even though that's God's word, we differ in terms of understanding, interpreting prophecy. In other words, it's not always going to be laid out as history written in advance in every detail. In some cases it is, others it isn't. But in these cases, both of these men spoke about these things months earlier. So I was trying to find someone that would have credibility for having spoken about it in advance. Because otherwise you could say, well, why should we listen to you now? You didn't speak about it in advance. And both of the advanced words talked about something major shifting in the Passover. And I think it was January 26th, Chuck Pierce talked about a massive plague that was going to invade the land. So they've spoken of either a clear shift or a clear diminishing. So can you say decisively, if it comes to pass or not? Well, you can certainly say if something dramatic happens, and suddenly at Passover, it's like, wow, this was dramatic, or a vaccine came out, or a cure, or suddenly the cases just dropped dramatically, that would be one thing. If everything went on totally normally, that would be one thing. So there was enough, I didn't play all the clips, but there was enough from what I listened to that seemed to focus clearly on ending on a clear change by April 15th, 16th, and the original words were spoken some months ago. So to me, I thought this is as good an opportunity to test as anything, because a lot of words can be very ambiguous and only become clear as they come to pass. So hopefully there'll be enough clarity through them that we can actually test, and that it won't be. Now, look, maybe there's some shift and people say that's it or not. That would make it more difficult. But I'm looking for something fairly dramatic from what I understand these men were saying. And if everything was on totally normally, then I'll say, obviously, they were wrong. They missed it. Well, but if we have some kind of dramatic shift, I'll say, hey, was God getting our attention?
But Mike, right now, every day is different. I mean, every morning we get up and some governor has decided to, start using the National Guard to look for refugees from New York and Rhode Island or something like that. I mean, there is no normal in this situation. It changes every single day. That's why I'm wondering, isn't this a self-fulfilling prophecy? Because I think the fact that Rodney Howard-Browne has a mugshot today because his church met yesterday. What if somebody had quote-unquote prophesied something for whatever the date today is, the 30th of March? Would that be a fulfillment because Rodney Howard-Browne got arrested? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, I think, again, you have to look at the full text of what they said. I played part of it on the radio, but I have links where folks can listen to the larger context, all right, which, as I said, is more specific. But there's something that's supposed to actually happen if these men are right about the virus itself. There's going to be a different stage. So right now there's been increase, okay? If suddenly everything changes or what the folks are forecasting is different, that would get my attention. But here, I'll give you an example. I got contacted by a staunch opponent of the Charismatic movement during the days when Trump was running for office. And he said to me, will you call out those who prophesied that he would be president if he's not elected? I said, of course I would. Absolutely. I'll deal with it. I said, will you acknowledge these as true words if they come to pass? Well, he didn't respond then, but subsequently responded later and said, no, that doesn't make it true because he could have won anyway. And he was one of two candidates. I said, but these were words spoken years before he ever thought of running for office. And he said, no, that wouldn't prove it. The only way to prove it is negative. So to me, it was kind of a worthless endeavor then. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But my whole goal, James, and maybe these weren't the best examples, but because this was on everybody's mind and there were specific dates, my goal was to put these forward for public attention with the hope that there could be accountability and or recognition of God speaking. So if it's too nebulous, then that's what we're going to have to deal with. But I look for the clearest things with specific dates from guys that have spoken about this previously. So my whole goal, again, in doing this, was to put forward a model where we can look at this in advance, say the words are out there, and now evaluate whether they're true or not. Maybe they'll be too nebulous. Maybe both will be able to say how we told you. But I'm hoping for something decisive either way.
I assume you know these gentlemen?
I've never met Tracy Cook. I've met Chuck Pierce a couple of times, but we've never ministered together, never had a lengthy conversation. So I'm really in no relationship with either of them.
Okay.
But I have friends who are in relationship with them. I
mean, I just, obviously, I don't have the time to do this type of thing, but somebody's going to dig back into years worth of their sermons to see if they've ever talked about plagues or anything like that before. Eventually, I would assume, but I don't have time for that kind of thing. We've got plenty of other stuff going on, but I heard you talking about it, and so I had to tweet, and so I wanted to get your take on what was said there. Now,
yeah, but a guy like Chris, as much as he's a critic of mine, and I feel often unfair. I mean, I don't follow his stuff. It's just I get headlines sent to me. But he should actually appreciate a charismatic leader drawing attention to words in advance with the hope of saying, hey, if these come to pass in a clear, accurate way, that should get our attention. If they don't in a clear, accurate way, that should get our attention. So that's my goal here,
right?
To draw attention to these things rather than just let all the stuff be out there. And in my circles, I bridge your world and then the charismatic world. A lot of people are asking about this and what about this prophecy? So I'm trying to address it constructively as a shepherd in the body.
Well, I would imagine that there's a lot of stuff being said right now in light of what's going on that has to be examined, especially examined from a biblical perspective. And so I would encourage you to be doing that. So